Chapter 21 Afterlife. The boundaries of afterlife are even more complicated than the rules that pen us in on earth. Depending on their deeds, the dead can be dispatched to many different abodes. Fortunate Brahmins are sent to Brahmaloka, where they can learn divine wisdom directly from the Creator. The best among Kshatriyas go to Indraloka, filled as it is with pleasures both artistic and hedonistic. Lesser warriors must be content with the courts of the god of death, or the sun and moon deities. For evildoers, there are 136 levels of hell, each corresponding to a particular sin, and each with its own set of tortures, such as tongue tearing, being boiled in oil, or being devoured by ravenous birds, all of which our scriptures describe with great relish. Dhri's tutor was of the opinion that virtuous women were sent directly into their next birth, where, if they were lucky, they reincarnated as men. But I thought that if lokas existed at all, good women would surely go to one where men were not allowed, so that they could be finally free of male demands. However, I prudently kept this theory to myself. In any case, I knew enough to realize that there would be trouble when sage Narad, who had paid us a surprise visit, said to Yudhishthir, "No great king, while visiting Indra's court, I didn't see the spirit of your respected father there." We had dined on the finest fare our cooks could come up with at such short notice, for Narad had a discriminating palate. From fried bitter melons and stuffed brinjals to lentils cooked to a buttery paste that melted in the mouth, and thickened rice pudding bristling with almonds. Having eaten their fill, the men were now relaxing on silken cushions. I sat behind Yudhishthir, passing around a platter of silvered betel leaf and digestive spices, and assessing the sage from under my veil. With his slight build and his simple white clothes, Narad looked harmless, but he had quite a reputation. He had powerful family connections, emerging, it was said, directly from the brain of Brahma, and was a formidable devotee of Lord Vishnu. His favorite activity was to travel from court to court and world to world, collecting gossip and spreading mayhem. He had already contributed to the demise of several regimes and was justly known as Narad Troublemaker. I wondered what he was planning. I did see him, however, in the court of the god of death, he added, cocking his head like a mischievous raven. "But why is my father in Yama's court and not Indra's?" Yudhishthir asked, peeved by this slight to family honor. "Your grandfather's there too," Narad said, yawning delicately behind his hand. "But don't let it disturb you. They were quite comfortable, though the thrones there aren't as splendid as those in Indra's court, nor the cushions as easeful to the posterior. However, What can we do to ensure that our ancestors enter Indra's court? Yudhishthir interrupted. By a strange coincidence, Narad said, that is just what I asked them. They said that if you performed the Rajasuya sacrifice, they'd be sent there. Then we shall certainly perform it, Yudhishthir announced. Tell us how it's to be done. Narad wrinkled his brow, feigning anxiety. It's too dangerous. First you must make all the kings of Bharat pay you tribute, and if they don't, you must battle and defeat them. And then you must hold a huge fire ceremony that they all have to attend. I was skeptical about the entire endeavor. Even if there were Lokas, what proof was there that the dead could be promoted from one to the next based on what we did here on earth? Yudhishthir too hesitated. He was a peace-loving man. But Arjun's eyes glittered, and Bhim raised his fists high. Sahadev and Nakul sat intent and still. I doubted that they cared about ancestors or believed any more than I did in the Lokas. However, Narad's story gave them the perfect opportunity to shake off their lassitude, polish their rustling battle skills, fill the royal coffers, and gain renown, and be lauded as dutiful offspring at the same time. When do we start? Arjun asked. Let us not rush into things, Yudhishthir said. We'll send for Krishna. He'll advise us. Ah, Krishna, the master tactician, Narad cried, clasping his palms. How fortunate you are to have him as your friend. You do know that he is the incarnation of Vishnu himself, don't you? He threw me a sly glance, checking to see if I believed this outrageous claim. Is he really an incarnation? Arjun asked curiously. He seems so normal, always joking around with us. He only reveals his divinity to those who are ready for it, Narad said. And though he spoke to Arjun, it was me that he fixed with his gaze. I had dismissed Narad's words as another of his teasing tricks, but later, when I was alone, I couldn't stop thinking about them. What if I had presumed wrongly? What if there were, in truth, worlds upon worlds invisible to ordinary mortals, the ways stars are in the daytime? What if the gods did come down from time to time to live among us and guide our destinies? Past the sleeping silhouette of Nakul, my current husband, beyond the dark window of my bedroom, a pale yellow moon hung low in the sky. What mysteries were hidden behind its pockmarked face? I could not decide if the laws of those worlds should supersede ours, if we should bow before the advice of a god-man, even when it went against everything that made sense. I watched Krishna carefully when he arrived. He didn't act particularly godlike. He teased me as usual, remarking that I'd put on weight, a blatant lie. He insisted that I cook for him, and then claimed, another lie, that my milk sweets were nowhere as good as the ones he had grown up on in Vrindavan. When my husbands asked him about the Rajasuya, he was surprisingly amenable to the idea. He said the country was filled with corruption and needed shaking up. A carefully controlled bloodletting now might prevent a great carnage later on. He seemed to have forgotten his earlier warnings about envy. Krishna helped my husbands create a strategy. They began by killing Jarasandha, the most feared ruler of the time, and incidentally a long-time enemy of Krishna. Bhim tore his body in two during a wrestling match, a feat he described to me later in delighted, excruciating detail. They then released the many kings Jarasandha had imprisoned in his labyrinths and gave them back their kingdoms. This made my husbands so popular that wherever they went after that, they were greeted with friendship. Who knows what would have happened in Anga, Karna's kingdom? But Krishna adroitly avoided the problem by instructing Yudhishthir to send a courteous letter to the blind king, stating that out of respect for their uncle, the Pandavas would not challenge any of his allies. Not to be outdone in sophistry, the blind king sent back a flowery missive, stating that he would be delighted if the Pandavas managed to gain the support of all the kings of Bharat and increase their father's name. After they had been victorious and sent him an invitation, he wrote back that though he himself could not travel because of his infirmity, Duryodhan and his friends would be happy to attend the festivities at this palace of ours that everyone spoke of so highly. Dhritarashtra's letter sent us into a frenzy of activity. We'd been prepared for a large gathering, but we hadn't thought that the Kauravas would come. Knowing that they would be here changed everything. My husbands strode up and down the palace, examining everything with a newly critical eye, the way they thought Duryodhan would. Even the mild-mannered Yudhishthir grew snappish. It was imperative that everything be perfect by the time the Kauravas arrived. Then they'd be forced to acknowledge how well their poor cousins, the ones they'd always insulted and ridiculed, had done. And I threw myself into the preparations, holding nothing back, as a good wife should. It wasn't difficult. I too wanted Duryodhan to stare open-mouthed at what they had made of the wilderness. I too wanted him to be dazzled by all their treasures, including myself, their crown possession. It was the least my husbands deserved after all these years of struggle and shame, of fleeing in fear for their lives. If there was another reason why I forced my maids to work deep into the night, polishing and laundering, or spurred my cooks to create exotic new dishes for every banquet we would hold, or commissioned the royal tailor to design clothing more elaborate than anything we had ever worn, or ordered the gardeners to coax each plant in my garden into blooming, I was careful not to examine it.